debt collector, a price too high, Chapter 1, Drowning in Debt. The envelope sat on the table like a predator, its crimson lettering glowing unnaturally in the dim kitchen light. James Archer stared at it, his fingers twitching with the desire to tear it apart, to banish it from existence. But even as he clenched his fists, he knew it wasn't the paper he feared, it was what it represented. The word "final" scrawled across the top had a weight that pressed down on him like an iron shroud. Across the room, Rebecca leaned against the counter, her arms crossed tightly, her face etched with exhaustion and a faint glimmer of resentment. She hadn't spoken much lately, but the sharpness in her gaze was cutting enough. "Another one?" she asked, her voice low but steady. James nodded, unable to meet her eyes. He pushed the envelope across the table, letting it join the chaotic pile of unopened letters. "It's just a delay, I'll figure it out." Rebecca laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that echoed in the small kitchen. "That's what you said last month, and the month before that." She looked away, biting her lip, as if the words she wanted to say were too cruel to let loose. James bristled. "I'm trying, Rebecca. I'm doing everything I can." "Are you?" she snapped, the dam finally breaking. "Because all I see is us sinking while you keep making promises you can't keep. Do you even have a plan, James? Or are we just waiting for the electricity to shut off and the eviction notice to show up?" Her words cut deeper than he cared to admit. "I'll fix it," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "You've been saying that for a year." Rebecca's voice softened, but it wasn't out of sympathy. It was the kind of softness that came with resignation. "Ethan deserves better than this, so do we." James looked toward the living room, where the faint sound of cartoon music drifted in. Ethan's laughter bubbled up, bright and carefree. For a moment, it was enough to drown out the crushing silence between his parents. James clenched his jaw. "I said I'll fix it." Rebecca didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the pile of unopened envelopes and his spiraling thoughts. That night, James sat in his cramped home office, the glow of the computer screen casting long shadows across the walls. He'd been staring at the same spreadsheet for hours, trying to make the numbers balance. No matter how many times he shuffled the figures, the result was always the same. They were drowning. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, its rhythm growing louder and more insistent with each passing second. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him, when the sound of a soft whisper broke the stillness. "Fix it." James froze. He looked around the room, heart pounding, but saw nothing. The air felt heavier, colder, as if the room had dropped 10 degrees in an instant. "Fix it," the whisper came again, louder this time, laced with an unnatural rasp. James's breath hitched as his gaze fell on the computer screen. The spreadsheet was gone, replaced by a blank white page. Slowly letters began to appear, as if an invisible hand was typing, "I can help you." The room felt as though it were alive, the shadows on the walls twisting and writhing. James's pulse thundered in his ears. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The screen flickered, and another message appeared. "You know who. All you have to do is ask." A soft chuckle echoed through the room, faint but unmistakable. James leapt up, sending his chair crashing to the floor. His chest heaved as he stared at the screen, now back to the spreadsheet he'd been working on. The house fell silent again, but the shadows seemed darker, the air heavier. In Ethan's room, James stood by the door, watching his son sleep. The boy clutched a stuffed bear, his small face serene. For a moment, James felt an overwhelming wave of guilt crash over him. "I'll fix it," he whispered again, though the words felt hollow. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of something in the hallway mirror, a flicker of movement. It was there for only a second, but it sent a jolt of terror through him. A man stood in the reflection, dressed in an immaculate suit. His face was obscured, but his presence radiated an air of cold authority. When James spun around, the hallway was empty. Only the mirror remained, reflecting a scene that no longer made sense. Chapter 2. The stranger appears. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, but it brought no warmth. James sat on a bench in the city park, gripping a cup of lukewarm coffee he couldn't bring himself to drink. His eyes were sunken, his shirt wrinkled, and the weight of another sleepless night hung heavy on his shoulders. The park buzzed with life around him. Children laughed as they chased each other, joggers pounded along the paths, and pigeons pecked at crumbs left by strangers. Yet James felt detached from it all, as though he were watching life unfold through a foggy window. "Rough day?" a voice said, cutting through the haze. James looked up. Standing before him was a man in a charcoal grey suit, tailored to perfection. His face was sharp, almost unnaturally symmetrical, with high cheekbones and piercing eyes that seemed to gleam like polished obsidian. Everything about him was pristine, from his slicked back hair to the black leather gloves on his hands. James blinked. The man hadn't been there a moment ago, he was certain of it. Yeah, James mumbled, unsure of what else to say. The man smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. "Mind if I join you?" James shrugged, and the man sat beside him, placing a sleek briefcase on the ground. His presence was magnetic, the air around him charged with an energy James couldn't quite place. "I couldn't help but notice you looked troubled," the man said, his voice smooth and measured. "I've been told I have a knack for recognizing a man at his breaking point." James tensed. "That obvious, huh?" The man chuckled, a sound both warm and unnervingly cold. "Let's just say I've seen your type before. A good man burdened by circumstances beyond his control. A family man, no doubt." James's grip on the coffee cup tightened. "Who are you?" The man extended a gloved hand. "Victor Crow. Let's just say I'm in the business of solving problems." James hesitated before shaking his hand. Victor's grip was firm, his glove cool against James's skin. "What kind of problems?" James asked, though a part of him didn't want to know. Victor's smile widened. "The kind that keep you up at night. The kind that whisper in your ear when you're alone. Debt, for instance." James froze. "How do you? It's my job to know," Victor interrupted smoothly. "And it's also my job to offer solutions. Solutions that banks and creditors can't provide." James narrowed his eyes, his skepticism bubbling to the surface. "Sounds like you're offering a deal. What's the catch?" Victor laughed, a rich, velvety sound that seemed to ripple through the air. "Catch? Oh, James, there's always a catch. But that doesn't mean it isn't worth it." James's stomach twisted. "How do you know my name?" Victor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Let's just say I'm very good at what I do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it delicately on the bench between them. The card was black, with embossed silver lettering that seemed to shimmer unnaturally. James picked up the card reluctantly. The weight of it was unnerving, heavier than it should have been, as though the material wasn't just cardstock. Embossed in silver were the words, "Victor Crow Consultant for Unique Financial Solutions." There was no phone number, no email, just the name and title. As James tilted it in the sunlight, the letters seemed to shift and ripple like oil on water. "You're not exactly selling yourself with vagueness," James said, forcing a laugh that fell flat. Victor's smile didn't waver. "I don't need to sell anything. When the time comes, you'll call on me." "You'll see." James opened his mouth to respond, but Victor had already risen from the bench. He picked up his briefcase, tipped an imaginary hat, and began walking away. "Wait!" James called after him, standing abruptly. "What exactly are you offering?" Victor paused mid-step, turning just enough for his profile to be visible. His eyes gleamed with something dark and ancient. "A second chance," he said simply, then continued walking. James watched him disappear down the path, his figure swallowed by the shadows of the trees. He looked down at the card again. Its weight lingered in his palm, a silent promise or threat. Chapter 3. Whispers in the dark. That night James sat in his home office, staring at the card on the desk. He'd tried to put it away, shoving it into his pocket earlier, but every time he looked at the stack of bills beside him, his thoughts returned to Victor. A second chance. The words echoed in his mind like a broken record. Rebecca's earlier argument replayed as well, her voice sharp and raw with anger. She had gone to bed hours ago, slamming the door behind her, leaving James alone with his thoughts and his growing desperation. The computer screen glowed faintly, casting shadows that danced across the room. James logged into his bank account, a ritual he dreaded but couldn't avoid. His stomach dropped as the numbers confirmed his worst fears. They were beyond saving. The room grew colder, the chill seeping into his bones. The faint scent of sulphur prickled his nose. though he couldn't pinpoint its source. "Call him," a voice whispered. James froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The whisper had come from nowhere, a soft, rasping sound that slithered into his ears. He turned slowly, but the room was empty. "Call him," the voice repeated, louder this time. James's breath quickened. His eyes darted to the mirror on the far wall, and for a fleeting moment he thought he saw a figure standing behind him, a dark silhouette with gleaming eyes. He spun around, his chair scraping against the floor, but the space was empty. The silence in the house was oppressive, as though it were holding its breath. His gaze fell to the card on the desk. The letters seemed to shimmer, almost pulsing in time with his racing heart. His hand moved of its own accord, reaching for his phone. "What am I doing?" he muttered, but the question felt hollow. He dialed. The line rang once, twice, before a click signaled the call had been answered. No greeting came, only the faint sound of static. "Hello," James said, his voice trembling. "Good evening, James," Victor's voice purred on the other end. It was as smooth and cold as it had been in the park. "I knew you'd call." James's throat tightened. "How did you? I told you, it's my job to know. Now let's get to work, shall we?" "I don't even know what you're offering," James stammered. "Oh, but you do," Victor replied. "You need money, you need security, you need freedom, and I can give you all of it." James swallowed hard. "At what cost?" There was a pause, followed by a soft chuckle. "Everything has a price, James, but I think you'll find mine to be quite reasonable." The room grew colder still, frost creeping along the edges of the window. James shivered, his free hand gripping the desk to steady himself. "Do you accept?" Victor asked, his tone dripping with anticipation. James hesitated, his mind a storm of fear, desperation, and faint hope. "Yes," he whispered, the words slipping out before he could stop it. The line went dead, but the chill in the room remained. The card on the desk burst into flames, the fire leaving behind only a faint trace of ash. And then silence. Chapter 4. The first payment. The next morning James woke to a ringing phone. The sound jolted him from a restless sleep on the couch, where he'd eventually collapsed, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. His head throbbed as he reached for the phone, the events of the previous night swimming faintly in his memory. "Hello," he croaked. "Mr. Archer?" A woman's voice, sharp and professional, came through the line. "Yes, this is James. I'm calling from Horizon Bank regarding your mortgage account. It seems there was an oversight on our part," the woman said smoothly. "Your payments appear to have been processed after all, and your balance is now current. We apologize for the confusion." James sat up, his heart pounding. "Wait, what? That can't be right." "I assure you it is," she said, her tone growing impatient. "You'll receive an updated statement in the mail within the week. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" "No," James said quickly. "Thank you." He hung up, staring at the phone as if it might explain what had just happened. He rushed to his laptop and logged into his bank account. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense. His mortgage was paid, and a sudden deposit of $50,000 sat in his checking account. His breath hitched. It wasn't possible. A loud thump from the hallway made him jump. He turned, heart racing, and saw Ethan's stuffed bear lying in the doorway. It hadn't been there the night before. He rose slowly, stepping into the hall. "Ethan?" he called, but there was no answer. The air was unnervingly still, the silence pressing against his ears. He bent to pick up the bear, only to freeze as a faint whisper brushed past him. "Payment received." James spun around, his back pressed to the wall. The hallway was empty, but the shadows seemed darker, moving unnaturally. Chapter 5. Fortune Comes Knocking. By the time Rebecca returned from running errands, James was pacing the living room, his thoughts racing. He didn't tell her about the mysterious deposit or the strange events that followed. Instead, he handed her the bank statement with trembling hands. "What's this?" she asked, frowning as she skimmed the numbers. Her eyes widened. "James, how did you do this?" He opened his mouth to explain, but stopped. What could he say? That he made a deal with a man who vanished like smoke and left behind whispers in the dark? "I told you I'd fix it," he said instead, forcing a weak smile. For the first time in months, Rebecca's face softened. She threw her arms around him, and he hugged her back, though his mind churned with unease. Over the next few weeks, their lives transformed. The debts that had once strangled them like vines began to disappear, one by one. James's credit score surged, offers from banks and lenders flooded in, and for the first time in years he could breathe. Rebecca's demeanor shifted as well. The hard edges of her frustration softened into cautious optimism. She began to smile again, to laugh, though there was a lingering shadow in her eyes. Ethan, too young to understand the details, seemed to thrive in the newfound stability, his once dull drawings bursting with color and hope. But for James, the relief was poisoned with dread. The voice in the hallway, the flames that consumed the business card. He couldn't shake the memory of that night or the icy presence that lingered in its wake.
End of part 1 of The Debt Collector. Please like and subscribe.